And welcome to Catholics Coast to Coast, where we love to just hang out with some of the best conversations happening at Podcast Central. You just lean up against the terminal, wait for your next session, and know that you're getting great insights into your Catholic faith. I'm Ace McKay, always glad to be a part of the ride, and as we enjoy our Labor Day weekend together, we're going to talk more about this week's conversations happening at the Mass. Let's get in with your word on the word with this weekend's reading.
One of the things that really fascinates me is seeing pictures of space. They are incredible.
Are you talking about the ones with like the hundreds and thousands of galaxies and stars and stuff?
Exactly. It gives me a sense of awe of how small we are in comparison. It puts my life into perspective, like making my problems seem a lot smaller.
Would you say that that makes you feel like more humble?
Yeah, I guess you could say that.
Hi, I'm Veronica, and this is Melissa. This week, we're going to take a look at the first reading for Sunday.
It comes from the book of Sirach and talks about the virtue of humility, how we are all called to be humble, and that God is glorified in our humility. The reading starts off with the words, "my son," and to me, that sounds like a parent about to give some advice.
The passage goes on to say that you will find favor with God because of your humility. You know who that reminds me of?
Who?
Mary.
Oh, absolutely. She's a great example of humility. She proclaimed God's will for her life when she said, "I am a handmaid of the Lord." She's definitely someone that we can turn to when we are struggling with being humble.
Sometimes it's hard to find a middle ground in being humble. It's not that you can't make your own decisions, it's that you value and respect that there's something more important. Like, Mary knew that God's will for her was far more important than whatever plan she could come up with.
Your challenge this week is to pray the litany of humility. We'll attach a link below.
And catch us next week here on EWTN.
Bye.
Toodles!
More from this weekend's readings from the Mass as we check in with Word on the Word each and every week in our Year C. You can find out more at Podcast Central. Go to EWTN.com/podcast or subscribe to Word on the Word wherever you listen to podcasts. I'm Ace McKay. As we continue with Catholics Coast to Coast, the Cardinal Newman Podcast is diving deeper into the layers of Catholic education, sports, culture, and the soul with great stories from NFL training sessions to Olympic-level athletic careers. It's all that we need to know to help us when it comes to a forming of who we are in Christ. Let's dive into this week's conversations with the Cardinal Newman Podcast on Catholics Coast to Coast.
Welcome back to the Cardinal Newman Society Podcast. I am your host, Kevin Murphy. We are going to continue our conversation today with Bill Thierfelder, who is wrapping up 21 years as the president of Belmont Abbey College, has escorted this college with a group of people to a new level. And the college is flourishing, and we want to talk a little bit about how he got there. And I want to start off, Bill, if I could, by having you address Catholic parents out there. Today, there are lots of things that are being imposed to the Catholic parent as being an authentic education. And I think we're getting mixed signals as to what truly is an authentic education. What would you say to Catholic parents? And by the way, you are a Catholic parent. You have 10 children.
Yes.
You have doubled the Murphy clan.
My
by
wife
the way.
and I have 10 children.
Yes, you do. Oh yeah, yeah.
My wife, who's the saint.
We would not
yeah.
leave her out as a.
That's right, Mary.
With 10 children, you've doubled the Murphy clan. We have 5. So as a parent and a person who's also in that boat of being a parent, what do you say to parents today about Catholic education? What would you say to tell them they should seek a Catholic education, or should they?
Yeah, well, you'll hear parents often, question, is it worth it? And the first question I ask you is, what's your child worth? Would you put a dollar value on your child in some way, right? Of course you wouldn't, right? And so as a parent, I hope that your first and foremost priority is that what you hope for is that they're going to live a good life and that they're going to go to heaven. I mean, that's, as a parent, you couldn't, that's what you're hoping for, right? You're not saying, I hope they become millionaires. I mean, if they do, that's great. That could be a good thing. Money, power, fame, by the way, can be very good things. St. Thomas Aquinas actually talks about money, power, fame, and pleasure. But he says if you don't have first things first, those 4 things have the potential to become addictions.
Right.
Because you will never have enough of any of them because none of those actually fill you up and bring you true contentment and happiness, right? So as a parent, you just want the best for your children. And what does that mean? Now, sure, I want them to be able to ultimately have a life and make a living and provide for themselves and their families and the community and so forth. Absolutely. I mean, that's sort of like a a bottom level, expectation. But I'm hoping for something much, much more than that. I'm hoping that they know, again, what it means to live a good life. And so what does it take for that to happen? And so very often in education today, we're being sold a bill of goods that says, first of all, I need to start like in first grade. If I want to be an engineer, or if I want to, whatever. No, you don't, to be honest with you. It's just like athletics. People are starting that like when they're doing travel teams when they're 5 years old. That's insanity. I mean, craziness. So my point, though, with the parents and looking at children like we do with ours is I want them to know how to think well. I want them to know how to think critically. I mean, Cardinal Newman,
Yes.
What was he about? The idea of a university. He was brilliant, and he saw the importance of the breadth and depth of education and knowledge, and that all of it went into that formation and education of a whole good person that knows his or her ultimate end. So I would say to parents, you want to make sure that people are taught to think well. The research right now shows that the average student right now today going into college is going to have something like 14 to 15 career changes. Ask yourself right now, how do you prepare for 14 to 15 careers? You don't. So if you have this narrow thought that I'm going to only be X, and that's all I study to be, okay, you might be okay for a while in X, and I would still argue you're not going to be completely happy in X because all you know is X. It's really about, can I think well so that I could go into anything? And you might say, well, wait a second, you didn't study that. If I know how to think well, I know how to reason, I know how to articulate my ideas, I know how to write extraordinarily well, I can just about go into almost anything, and I can learn it and figure it out.
I mean, Bill, the story you've shared about your own life, I think, is an example of that. You've changed industries, right?
Yeah.
At the drop of a hat in some ways, right? And God
Yes.
called you to that. So you had these skills that were built up. You hit on two things that I think we get consumed in today. And that is, you get these high schools that are getting you AP credits,
right.
And your AP credits are guaranteed, and you need to find out what it is you're doing, and you really should identify that before and I'm like, even when in my time in higher ed, the number one major on campus was undetermined.
Right. Yeah.
And I'm thinking that's still fine. But then the problem is people push you to figure out what it is as quickly as you can. And so they go into this broad business major, like a business administration or something. And it doesn't have a direct correlation into exactly what you're going to do, right? You go into pre-med, you can be a medical doctor. You go into pre-law, you're going to be a lawyer. You go into business administration, I don't know. What are you going to be?
Right.
So they gravitate toward those things. But I think the one thing we have to do is remind people that God is calling every single person. You mentioned Cardinal Newman. That was what he said. God gave me a definite mission. He gave you, Bill, a definite mission.
Right.
And he wants you to fulfill that. You have to find out what that is.
Right.
You
It's your
need
discernment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You need to cooperate with the will of God. But you also need to figure out what that is. And that's a tumultuous process that sometimes parents want to fix for their kid.
And that's another thing. Having 10 children, what you realize, first of all, is they're all different.
Yes.
They all have different personalities. They all have strengths and weaknesses. And again, what you're looking for in the education, at Belmont Abbey as an example, if let's say you didn't go into the honors college, our core is still a very balanced, structured core. I mean, you're taking courses in Western civilization, you're taking U.S. Constitution, you're taking theology, you're taking philosophy, you're taking some mathematics, you're taking a science. I mean, but the point is, it's not just a kind of a Chinese menu of selecting out stuff. It's a cohesive way of understanding whatever you're going to go into. So if you're going to do the broad business piece, it's still having the perspective on, for example, why would you be ethical or moral in your business dealings? How do you understand and relate to people? So it's not just, do you know the formulas, do you know concepts and so forth? It's like, you're going to be dealing with human beings. And how do you deal with those human beings?
Right. Your background and your coming up through sports, I want to talk a little bit about that because I know it's a passion of yours.
Yeah.
The connection, and this is something I think we've lost track of today, as well as the idea of what true education is, but I think we've also lost track of what sport is supposed to be teaching us and doing. Because as you said, people are recruiting young people to play a sport, and then they want them only in that one sport, right? Like you stay in that sport. Yeah. and they make it very difficult for you to go to other sports because they dominate your time.
Right.
How do you, Bill, I mean, with your background, tell us first of all about your background in sport, and then what are the things that you did with that transfer over to what you do here at Belmont Abbey?
I competed in track and field. I started out I went to Fordham Prep, went to Fordham University on a scholarship for track. I was a high jumper. They were going to drop the track team. I transferred to the University of Maryland. I'll just say the virtue part of what we're talking about, some of the other things, was not there. I was taught to high jump really well there. So I was an All-American there, 2-time All-American. I ended up, long story short, I mean, how do you even get into this? I was in the U.S. Olympic trials, but then I ended up on the Irish National Olympic team. I broke the Irish national record and won the Irish national championships, those kinds of things. And I competed internationally, so that's just my athletic background.
But that makes you, I mean, Bill, that puts you in the top percentage of athletes that have competed at that level and won at that level. This is, I mean, that's not something to just dismiss. That's a great gift.
It is a gift. In other words, I'm 6'8".
Yeah,
I didn't make myself 6'8", right? I mean, God gave me certain things, and
I was wanting God to make me 6'8". All right,
no, you're perfect. Right. You are perfect, right?
And
that's the thing to realize. And I think sometimes we always wish we were something else, And for example, I could have started when I was 5 years old and wanting to be a jockey,
right?
And that's not going to work out,
And at what age would you have got out of the jockey?
When my feet were dragging in the dirt as I'm riding on the horse, I think we would have recognized maybe this isn't for him, right? And that's the point: is that sports are very arbitrary if you think about it. We made them up. And there's going to be human beings who are better suited for these things that we call sport, that we say are really important, that have all kinds of money attached to them, right?
Yes.
But in essence, really, when I was at Maryland, for some reason what came to me is every human being from the beginning of time has played. And I was interested in that. I wasn't a scholar, but I was interested in, why did God do that? Why did God make us to play? Now, you can get the sociologists and others to give you all kinds of kind of surfacey answers that, sure, to be honest with you, I don't buy. But why is it that every human being has played? And I started to look at it, and I was shocked. I mean, I really was shocked. Socrates, Plato, Aristotle. I mean, Plato in 376 BC in the Republic said, "For he who changes sports is secretly changing the manners of the young, for the old to be dishonored among them and the young to be honored." Plato recognized the importance of sport and its influence. St. Francis de Sales, who would have thought St. Francis de Sales had anything to say about it? He said it's licit as long as it doesn't become an occupation. That gives us a whole other issue because it's a misnomer to say, for example, an NFL player. It's actually an NFL worker. Nothing wrong with that if that's your job, but we mix them up, and I think that confuses us sometimes. So this idea of sport, and I'll give you a quote that I love. Oh, I should finish maybe with a couple more, because here we are with Cardinal Newman Society, right? Cardinal Newman himself, who you would think maybe be the last person to say anything about sport being good, right? Actually said sports can be liberal in terms of a liberal education, and he gave examples of the palestra and Olympic Games where strength of body and mind and so forth were tested and so forth. So even Cardinal Newman recognized that. St. Augustine. Who would have thought St. Augustine would have anything to say about sport? And there's a quote from St. Augustine that begins, "As a boy, I played ball games." I don't know about you. I don't think of St. Augustine playing ball games. I picture him in a long robe holding a Bible, right? I mean, I just don't picture him playing. And he went on to talk about how he didn't properly direct sport and where he allowed pride to take over what he was doing. And so that led me then, as I looked, I said, okay, in Scripture, you got 1 Corinthians 6 and 9. And he talks about running the race. He talks about shadow boxing. And then I love at the end of Corinthians 9, he says, I drive my body and I train it.
Yes, I pummel my body. That's right.
Wow. That's strong words.
Absolutely.
Now, the reason St. Paul is talking about that is that he is from Tarsus, and in Tarsus was a palestra. And a palestra was an Olympic training center. So we're back to today. He knew everybody was going to relate to sport and understand it and be drawn to it. So he used those analogies so that they would better understand what he was trying to convey to them, that we're going to win that imperishable crown.
So how do you, Bill, take all of that and say, okay, because today it's so easy to get off balance when it comes to sports. I mean, as much as I know it in my head, I still watch the Kansas City Chiefs because I'm from Kansas City, and I'm
Right.
despondent when they lose, like
Right.
like it affects my day. And I'm like, this is ridiculous.
Right.
I'm not Patrick Mahomes, I'm like,
Right.
this is crazy. So how do you get that balance back? And then how do you then take the things? Because the one thing I did have a good coach who said certain things about applying the disciplines we have in our sport to life. And there were certain phrases that he made us memorize.
Mm-hmm.
And those phrases stuck with me throughout my whole life.
And sport applies to everything ultimately, right? I mean, it's really a way of training for life. But there's a great quote. It goes like this: sport properly directed develops character, makes a man courageous, a generous loser, and a gracious victor. It refines the senses, gives intellectual penetration, and steels the will to endurance. It is not merely a physical development then. Sport, rightly understood, is an occupation of the whole man. And while perfecting the body as an instrument of the mind, it also makes the mind itself a more refined instrument for the search and communication of truth, and helps man to achieve that end to which all others must be subservient, the service and praise of his Creator.
Beautiful.
That is Pope Pius XII.
Yeah,
Sport at the service of the Spirit.
how do we make sure that gets out to all Catholics? Because I think today it's so easy to get pulled into, as you said, being recruited at 5 and
Right.
and going on these traveling
Right.
teams. I mean, this is not something that is isolated. This is everywhere. It doesn't matter what sport, because sports have now bled to where sports used to be in a season.
Right.
Like you said, track. I remember you could still play basketball. I played basketball
There were
and still do
seasons.
track.
There were seasons.
Right now, it's almost impossible to do that because
Right.
of the demand of the individual sport on your time every day
Right.
throughout the entire year. So
And it's, sometimes people say to me, well, there's a choice to be made. As if, when we talk about sport and virtue, either we're going to be really, really good athletes or we're going to be really, really good people. As if somehow they're mutually exclusive. And I would make the argument that actually, whatever ability you have, if you're trying to do it with virtue, you're going to do far better than if you're trying to do it with vice. And it's understanding that it is the development of the whole person. So I don't know if we have time for this now. Can I give you one
Yes,
quick story?
please.
So working with an NFL wide receiver, and he's running some routes. We're by ourselves in an indoor facility. And about the 8th or 9th ball, he drops the ball. And when he drops it, he says a really bad word. I won't say what it is, but it was a really bad word. And I look at him and I said, "What did you say?" And again, he looks at me a little sheepishly and he goes, "Well, I dropped the ball." I said, "I know you dropped the ball." I said, "But what did you say?" And he goes, "Well, I dropped the ball." I said, "Thank you, Jesus," right? And he looks at me like I've hit him over the head with a 2x4. And he looks at me and he goes, "Well, why am I thanking Jesus? I dropped the ball." And I said, 1 Thessalonians 5:18, be thankful in all things, right? So he goes, "Thank you, Jesus." I said, "Good, come on back." Now I said, "Tell me what happened." Has no idea, right? But anybody you've worked with before coaching, they'll give you a statement with a question mark at the end. So he goes, "I didn't get my hands up," because he has no idea. I said, "No, actually, you didn't get your head around." And I'll show you this. If this picks this up, I don't know. But when you're a receiver, if you plant and you sweep your head around, 2 things happen. One is it takes a little longer for your head to sweep around. And 2, everything blurs until your head stops. But here's how fast you can turn your head. I'm gonna lose these headphones.
Yeah, right.
Okay?
Right.
So you can snap your head in such a way that you'd see a ball 10 yards sooner. So when he did his cut, he swept his head. He didn't snap it around, right? So I told him this. He goes back out. Well, before he goes back out, let me just make this point to you. You might say, "Well, why did you say thank you, Jesus? Like, what does that have to do with him being a wide receiver and being better, right?" I'm going to give you 2 reasons. First one's the higher argument. It's the right thing to do. Be thankful in all things. It's gratitude. It's the right thing. The second, though, is purely pragmatic. It's purely sports performance. If he dropped the ball, he dropped it for a very specific reason. But while he's out there kicking the ground and cursing, what doesn't he know? Why he dropped the ball.
Right.
Which means he's going to drop it again for the very same reason.
It keeps you from the very thing you're trying to
That's exactly
achieve.
right. By saying thank you, Jesus, you get rid of all the garbage, and it allows you to reflect on what happened. So he goes back out, he runs more routes. About 9th or 10th route, he drops another ball. This time I see it. He's about to say that, and he stops and he looks back at me and I go, "Yeah?" And he goes, "Thank you, Jesus." I go, "Good, come on back." So now he comes back and I said, "Tell me what happened." And he goes, "It's exactly what you said. I did it again. I came up, I planted. I said, perfect." Now I didn't say, "Yeah, you got to fix that." I said, perfect. You know why? Because he knew what he did.
Right.
And you can change nothing in life without awareness, right?
I think it was John Wooden that we should debrief success and failure so that we can learn to repeat one and not repeat the other.
Right. And I would even challenge that remark to say it's not the failure, the good, the bad, or anything else. It's just what happened.
Yeah.
It's objective. Just what happened. It's not. Don't even assign like a value
good
to
or
it.
bad.
Just what happened, because that value stuff is what clouds and distracts.
Gotcha.
So anyway, he knows that. He goes back out. This guy could be on ESPN. I mean, the catches he's making the rest of the day, and I think he might have dropped one more ball the rest of the day, and he dropped it, he yelled out at the top of his lungs, "Thank you, Jesus," and he meant it. So here's my point. That man became a better man that day in every way, physically, mentally, and spiritually.
Yeah.
We didn't have to sacrifice anything. We didn't have to say, now we're going to kneel down afterwards and say prayers. That's fine. But we make the mistake of separating these things and not realizing that our expectation should be that all of them are together at the same time. That is what sports should be. That is what we're called to. And I will say this to you. We think of things like cathedrals, great works of art, nature. These things have us raise our eyes up and consider God, something beyond ourselves, right? But often we don't think of sport that way. But I'll give you an example. David Rhodesia, who ran the half mile in the 2012 London Olympics, he won that race. He led it from the beginning and won that race in a world record time, and I don't know if anybody knows times or not, 1 minute and 40 seconds. 1 minute and 40 seconds to run a half mile. That is, unless you saw it, you'd say that's unbelievable. That's not possible, right?
I would be happy with a lap.
That's right? So 2 laps, running them in 50 seconds each is remarkable. But here's the point. Go watch it. It's on YouTube. When you're watching this man run, the beauty of his body moving, the strength, the control, the precision, the courage, the perseverance, it made me think that this man is made in the image and likeness of God. It was like, look what God did. I mean, he cooperated, but look what God did, like what he allows us to do as human beings. So sport has this ability to raise us up and have us contemplate the highest things, which is the service and praise of our Creator.
And I agree, as provided that a person doesn't see themselves as the ultimate end to that.
Right.
As opposed to the God who made them.
That's right.
And that is, and we see that all the time today, you know? I mean, people reach the pinnacle of their sport, and you can almost tell that the difference between the person who thanks God for the gifts that they have and then a person that thinks, yeah, look at what I did, right?
Well, if you haven't gotten sufficient formation, you start to believe what you're hearing.
Right.
And everybody in the world is clapping you on the back telling you how great you are. And you start to actually believe it. Instead of recognizing what I said earlier, I am nothing, I know nothing, I have nothing. I'm a steward. Anything good I have, I know where it came from. And the best I could hope for is that I'm going to double the talent. I'm going to give back to God what he's given me.
And then the time of fame and the time of fortune, the things that people, is so fleeting. I mean, I laugh today. I'm old enough now to remember great athletes that impacted me in life, that when I mention them to my children, they have no idea who they are. I mean, even today, people are starting to say, Michael Jordan? Like what? Who's
Was he
that?
a player?
And I'm like, are you kidding?
Yeah.
I mean, I'll say a Larry Bird to somebody, and people think they don't know who Larry Bird is. You know, that you lose, and it's so fast.
Well, I wrote a book, Less Than a Minute to Go, The Secret to World-Class Performance in Business, Sport, and Everyday Life. And that Less Than a Minute to Go title was for a reason. It's a very sports kind of title. Oh, less than a minute to go. But it's also a life message. Our life is a billionth of a second. It goes by in a flash. And I have a white beard. I can tell you, it's gone so fast. You're like, how did it get here? Like, how did I get to this point? And by the way, it's almost the paradox of the long and the short. Some days seem like forever. They seem like they're never going to end. And yet at the same time, you suddenly look back and you're like, where did the last 60 years go?
Flies.
So that less than a minute to go, the reason of the double entendre was to make clear that there's something about sport that if it is properly directed, as that quote that I gave from Pope Pius XII, it is a good. So play, and by the way, when I say play in sports, people might think those are two different things. There's 4 kinds of play. Sport is the competitive form of play, but it's all play. So people can think sport's the problem. I don't know if you hear that all the time. Oh, sport's terrible. I don't want anything to do with it. Matter of fact, as Catholics, I hear 2 things. Oh, it's terrible. I don't want anything to do with it. I don't even look at it. Or you get the other extreme, which is, yeah, I don't like the immodesty and vulgarity and some of the other stuff, but what are you going to do? And so you just pay and go to the games. Both are untenable.
Right.
We're called to change the sport. By the way, we pay for the sport. And if everybody hasn't figured this out yet, money runs the whole thing.
Right.
So we got the money. We're the ones determining what is happening or not happening.
Well, you having 10 children, I having 5, I remember going to sports and thinking to myself, my gosh, I need a loan, to take my kids to a game.
Yes.
I mean, you pay for parking, you pay for, and then the kids get there. And of course, everything is on the table, the hot dogs, the cotton candy, whatever it is.
That's a second mortgage right there, So, I mean, but you even bring it up when you said like about parents and sport. I mean, we do get too caught up. And I'm not saying, look, is there anything wrong with getting some knowledge or coaching or something in a particular thing? No. But it's gone to excess.
Exploring the radical claim that virtue, beauty, and discipline belong in both the classroom and the weight room. That is the Cardinal Newman Podcast. You can always hear more of that when you stream at Podcast Central. Just go to EWTN.com/podcast or simply subscribe wherever you like to stream. That way you don't miss future episodes. I am Ace McKay. When Catholics Coast to Coast returns, Gaudiumetspes is helping us to learn more about the real presence of Jesus, and with Larry Chapp, chatting with Dr. Michael Taylor about his article that points us back to this on a daily basis. We'll get into that coming up after the break on Catholics Coast to Coast.
The destination for great Catholic audio programming is EWTN Podcast Central, featuring the best of EWTN radio, as well as faith-filled podcasts from our friends and affiliates across the nation, all in one place, all free. If it's central to the faith, you can find it on EWTN Podcast Central. It's like podcast heaven. Visit EWTN.com/radio/podcasts today.
Hey everyone, and welcome again to another episode of Gaudiumetspes22.com Podbean podcast and YouTube video. Just a quick housekeeping before I introduce our guest of honor. Once again, I want to remind people I'm right in the middle of selling this farm, and every single time I turn around, there's something new to do, or people coming to see the farm, but so far we haven't had any offers, so please say a prayer that we do get offers. And if you know anybody that's looking for a nice small 10-acre plot in the middle of northeastern PA in the woods, please have them contact me. At any rate, that's why the podcasts have sort of been fewer lately, just because my house is torn up and so on. But it was torn up. Things are getting back together. Next month in September, I do have 2 interesting interviews lined up. One with Bishop Eric Varden, and also with Cardinal Ouellet of Canada. So those are 2 but other than the one today, there isn't one on the docket. I need to have a part 2 with Paul Seaton. But other than that, and I'm having one on Friday with my irascible, maladroit misanthrope, former colleague Rodney Hauser. That's on Friday, on Fry Talk. But anyway, enough of that. We have today with us a repeat victim here on the podcast. He's been on here before, Dr. Michael Taylor. Welcome to the show, Doc.
Thanks, Larry. Thanks for having me on. It's always a pleasure.
And just to refresh people's memories, Dr. Taylor is a teaching fellow and dean of students at Thomas More College of Liberal Arts in Merrimack, New Hampshire. And one of Dr. Taylor's specialties is the interfacing of sort of communal ecclesiology, Trinitarian theology, and I guess, for want of a better word, you could put it differently, the environment, creation, nature. You once worked for the Laudato Si Institute, right, in Spain?
That's right, under the Archbishop of Granada, Javier Martinez.
I think
I will say that was.
Go ahead.
That was very much oriented to the pastoral care of the rural life in Spain, in that diocese, which was and is very much in crisis, as most people have probably heard of the emptying of the European villages in the rural landscape. So absolutely,
it's a crisis all over, and I do consider Laudato Si to be the best thing produced by the Francis Pontificate. I think it's wonderful. I've had my criticisms of the Francis Pontificate. Laudato Si would not be among them. I think it's a beautiful document. But anyway, today's interview with you is part of my official ongoing series of Communio, International Catholic Review podcast, wherein, at the request of the editors of Communio, of which I am one, I have been asked and tasked with interviewing in each issue of Communio authors of articles. That's why I'm interviewing you, although I'd be happy to do so otherwise. That's why I'm interviewing Bishop Varden, because there's an interview with him in the same issue of Communio, which is dedicated to baptism, which your article really is not about, but that's okay. Here it is, Communio International. So your article is instead entitled Creation as a Monstrance, not monstrous, monstrance of God's Real Presence, a metaphysical reflection on the modern cult of potency and Eucharist. Fascinating article. I encourage everybody to subscribe to Communio, obviously, but if you already do subscribe to Communio, sometimes you get it in the mail and you think, okay, yeah, that looks interesting. This looks interesting. Maybe I'll read that later. This is really a fantastic article. It's well worth sitting down, taking your time, and reading the dadgum thing, as Hauser would say, the dadgum thing. Let's. You can start any way you want, but I there's a quote that you give in this article from Thomas Aquinas, where I might be paraphrasing, where it sort of says, false opinions about nature have a nasty habit. That's my paraphrase. False opinions about nature have a nasty habit of spilling over into false opinions about God. I take that to be the sort of essence in many ways of the, let's put it, at least not necessarily the main theological point of the article, but its main motivation. And so let's begin at the beginning, which is obviously modern human beings, modernity, however you want to characterize it, has a false notion of nature, which has led it to false notions of God, if in fact no notions of God, which we'll get into in a second. Now, as I said, you can attack this article any way you want, but you begin with a critique of the technocratic paradigm, and that it has led to what Charles Péguy called, as you quote, a mystical disaster. So maybe we could begin with you unpacking the first part of your article here, where you talk about what is the vision of nature that modernity has? What is that technocratic paradigm?
Sure. Yeah. So, I mean, just to go off of that quote you pointed out by Aquinas, I think I've found that much of my work keeps coming back to that quote, because just the way our reason it works, it's that you draw conclusions about the cause from the effects that you see. So it matters quite a bit, how you interpret creation, whether it's creation or not, or just a bunch of random stuff. And that explains, as I've been working on this topic for more than 15 years, explains a lot of what we see around us. So this article was, for me, an attempt to tie together a lot of different threads, a lot of different critiques of modernity, and to get to the core of what was it that happened, why are we where we are, especially considering that a lot of the culprits that are blamed were nominally Catholics or Christians. So, yeah. And that actually is the impetus for many moderns and environmentalists to blame Christianity for the ecological crises that we see today. So, the mystical disaster that Péguy is talking about is at the heart of this. But how does the modern world see nature creation today? What does the technocratic paradigm do to our vision of things? I mean, the easiest way to put it is that we have been taught to see nature as a machine, and this is foisted upon us from our earliest childhood, when we're sat down and have a science textbook plopped in front of us, in which the cell is drawn or described as a machine, as a factory, and the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell, and all that stuff, totally divorced from anything we can physically experience, and immediately imposing this analogy of mechanism onto nature, which is a very interesting thing. Christ in his gospel uses analogy a lot, but they're almost always natural, organic, or personal analogies. Very rarely mechanical analogies. But when we came to start to understand better the laws of nature, that vision of a mechanical nature started to dominate entirely, right? So there are things about nature that are mechanical. The stars move in a predictable way, and things are generally predictable. That's what makes it rational. That's the logical, the logos element of creation. But that does not permit us to reduce nature to being a machine, right? And so that's why I love this quote from Hildegard of Bingen so much, who says, you can take apart a clock and put it back together and it will continue to work, but you can't do the same with a living thing, right? And
right.
that goes as much for scripture as it does for organic beings. So yeah, in short, that way of viewing the world as a machine has taken over, and that isn't just reduced to organic objects and animals and all that, but actually infiltrates the way we think about our own reason, the way we relate with each other, and has, on the flip side, the other side of the coin, is that the response to that, many good-hearted hippies and others have come up with opposing theories of Gaia and cosmic flux, and seek to restore the relationality and holism of the world by insisting upon the unity of all things, which also, unfortunately, dissolves our real difference. So we are, I think the Catholic Church is the only bastion of truth in this area, the metaphysics and the keeper of metaphysics, as Balthasar would say, and that we have this great task of drawing the modern and postmodern worlds out of their blindness.
Very well put. I'm reminded of our mutual friend Mike Hanby writes so much about this exact same topic, about the image of the modern world is dominated by the image of the machine, and of course machines themselves have changed radically over the past centuries. But the essence of the machine, though, is that it is, in a sense, sufficient unto itself. It's a closed system that, once you put fuel into it, once you put gas in an automobile, or plug in a computer, or electricity to your vacuum cleaner, there's self enclosed machines, entities that require, in a sense, no greater interface beyond itself in order to keep doing what it's doing. And so that model then got transferred to the living organism. That, okay, as long as the living organism is given sufficient fuel, it's got its version of gasoline or electricity that it's taking in, then it too is machine-like and sort of closed off. But this is reductive and therefore misses many things. But I'm kind of getting ahead of myself. I want to go back to, in a sense, the very, very beginning once again, about how false notions of nature lead to false notions of God. And you started by saying, we can indeed look at effects and argue back to causes. You can back engineer to causes. Nevertheless, that's somewhat simplistic, right, in its own way, because yes, we can argue from effects back to causes, but that presumes that effects are very transparent in terms of what they are. Mm-hmm. And yet the fact is, we bring already our own interpretive apparatus to our perception of what it is we're seeing, if you will, in the empirical world. So if our whole mindset is dominated by the image of the machine, and life is just a machine, then when we look at the effects, all right, in the world of, say, life, and we want to back engineer that to its cause, we begin already with the presumption that we know what the cause is. All right. The cause is something that's going to produce a machine-like thing, and therefore we read the effects accordingly. So this then argues, right, for the importance of, uh, in an analogical sense, the importance of faith. As Aquinas himself says, yeah, we can reason to God and various other things using natural reason, but boy, is revelation kind of helpful here in getting us to see things through the right interpretive matrix.
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously faith and revelation help hugely. But at the same time, Paul will say in Romans that the pagans didn't have an excuse for not knowing God because God has made himself visible through his created works, right? So
Right.
You have, in theory, we should all be able to recognize God. And in fact, the pagans, you've got people like Peggy and C.S. Lewis kind of praising the pagans for at least for being humble before reality. So I think that the modern sin, the sin of modern man is this lack of humility more than anything else. This pride of thinking we understand things and not even allowing for mystery. Because the problem is, as you were talking about with machines, they're self-enclosed, they're self-explanatory, right? So if you can explain everything about something, you have eliminated the need for reverence before mystery. You've eliminated the need for self-doubt in terms of your own conclusions. So that's the other that reduces our own reason to a kind of machine, a kind of computing that is a closed circle, right? And that's where you get all these these popular modern scientific folks saying that eventually we will be able to answer all the questions of the universe. It's just a matter of time. Science will eventually conquer all that is knowable. So I think there really is the book of creation is the first book of Revelation, as the medievals referred to it, and there should be a way in which even non-believers can at least come to the doorstep of faith, right?
Yes,
But
yes.
it's interesting that Aquinas was critiquing other fellow Catholics who were at his time the Averroists who were trying to separate theology from philosophy, saying that don't go off on a tangent, expounding upon creation while claiming you're still Catholic because you hold the dogmas of the church. These two have to be aligned. You can't just say anything you want about creatures and remain within that realm. So it was a warning to others in the Middle Ages. So yeah.
Oh, absolutely. And I didn't mean to imply that one could not argue from effects to causes, as you correctly point out. St. Paul says that the pagans are without, in a sense, they are to be blamed for if they reject God, because God is to be seen in his creation. Nevertheless, my one and only point is how important it is.
Yeah.
In other words, what caused the blindness of those pagans who did reject the concept of God?
Yeah.
Who, what causes that blindness? And so another part of the beginning of your article deals with where you sort of you point out something that's near and dear to my heart that I've been harping on for years and years now, which is that never before in human history have we seen such an attenuation of the religious sense to the point of its darn near disappearance in any effective way. It's obviously still there. Grace is still operative. You can't erase the religious sense, but like any any capacity of human nature, unless it is exercised, it weakens. And so there's something unique about the modern world that makes a proper understanding of nature, from a Christian point of view anyway, really problematic. Because at least in pagan, we mentioned St. Paul and talking about the pagans, at least the pagans had a kind of natural religiosity. When Paul goes to the Areopagus, at least you can say, hey, there's the unknown God, and I'm here to tell you who that is, all right? He could presume upon a belief in divinity or divinities and so on. We can no longer presume that, and that's a huge problem, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And as I mentioned, that's why C.S. Lewis would say something to the effect of, maybe we need to convert modern man into good pagans before we can convert them into Christians. And Peggy will say something similar in that, you can convert a pagan soul. You can't convert someone who believes they have no soul. So, I think this is the same problem actually that Plato was dealing with back in his day, and why he insisted so vigorously upon the immortality of the soul. I mean, because without that breaking out of the immanent domain, without the transcendence, man is really trapped, and it's a as Ratzinger would say, it's a windowless bunker of his own making, because once you convince yourself that you understand everything about reality, you no longer have a way out, right? And you can, and this is something that I took me a while to realize. In my background's in biology and environmental studies, and so I was in a very secular environment in my first bachelor's degree, and it really caught my attention how people could have such widely differing opinions about things, until it became clear that we really do have these unexamined presuppositions about the nature of reality that have all these downstream effects on us, without us knowing. And so this is the value and the need of metaphysics today, to say, hold on a second, let's back up. Do I really believe all of these things that I am implicitly putting forth in the way I'm living my life? Right?
Yeah, so true. I like that idea of sort of maybe we need to repaganize some people before we can Christianize them in some ways.
There's certainly some truth to that.
Yeah, there's some truth. I mean, but I would rush in myself to say that that doesn't necessarily mean, therefore, that many of the manifestations of what we might call neo-paganism today, whether or not, in my opinion, they're an insult to real pagans of old.
Yeah.
The real pagans of old actually believed in the divinities. They believed in the archons. They believed in either that or in a kind of cosmic one, or whatever, the universe itself was a kind of divinity. It seems to me that a lot of modern spiritualities of nature, whatever we used to call it, New Age, or what, I don't know what they call it now, is just kind of an ersatz way of having your cake and eating it too, so that you can feel some vague hope of afterlife or spiritual connection or something in the midst of what amounts to a kind of practical atheism.
Yeah.
So
therapeutic religiosity.
yeah, therapeutic religion.
Spirituality.
I bring that up because I don't want viewers to misunderstand. When a Balthazar or a Peggy says maybe we need to begin by first taking the baby step of getting people to at least be good pagans before we can Christianize them, that's not necessarily an easy thing to do, because it has to engage in a kind of a restoration of an older classical worldview that just doesn't exist anymore.
That's true. I do find some hope in. So it's interesting, the way that many young people, not all of them certainly, but many young people who rightfully find themselves dissatisfied with modern society turn towards nature. And so there's huge popularity of rock climbing and going out in nature and all of these things. And that I think is in large part what's behind this strong environmental movement. So and nature as such is good. They're not wrong in recognizing that there's something good. They just can't find the creator in creation, right? So that's where the church should come in. I think of the story of Christopher McCandless, who was the subject of the book Into the Wild. Later became
I read the book, saw the movie.
Yeah, brutal, absolutely brutal story.
Went up to Alaska and ended up dying. Yeah.
Yeah, but he was, and so many young people identify, he's a cult classic. I mean, so many people identify that, so much so that people want to go to his bus without having learned the lesson.
Yeah, for those who don't know, he had this burning desire to just go live off the land and off in the wilderness, to run away into the wilderness. And he finds this bus, in his trek in Alaska, and he gets up there but he discovers that it's much, much, much harder to find food and live off the land than he thought that it was going to be, and his own supplies begin to run out. So he decides to leave, but then he finds that the little tiny stream that he had crossed coming in it was now a raging, river.
Yeah.
And so he couldn't cross it. So he ends up starving to death. He ate a plant that was kind of poisonous, and and that was seems to have been the end of him. Anyway, I don't mean to interrupt your flow, but
Yeah, no,
I wanted people to at least know what we're talking about here.
yeah,
That the reason why that became a cult classic, that book and the movie, is I think a lot of people have that same fantasy.
absolutely they do. Absolutely they do. I mean, and it was probably about 5 or 6 years ago that actually there was in the news that a woman from Belarusia died, drowned in that same river, trying to get to the bus on her honeymoon with her husband on the shore, supposedly. So, I mean, the youth
Wow.
of the world are drowning and dying on the shores of this longing for something more than what modern society can offer them. An important note about Christopher McCandless is that he came from a completely broken family. His dad, was living a double life, and he was reading the Transcendentalists, and was very much inspired by them. So, they're the youth are seeking, and the question is, can the church offer them an answer?
The Transcendentalist. He probably neglected to realize that Henry David Thoreau could only do what he did because he had friends bringing him food all the time.
And his mother doing his laundry. Yeah.
Yeah.
But Thoreau wasn't exactly a
A
statue.
survivalist. Yeah,
No.
I don't mean that to knock. I mean, there was a hermetic element to what Thoreau was aiming at. I just, as a cult hero of survivalist independence, he was not.
Yeah.
But I would also argue, and I don't mean to belabor this point, but I think that a lot of people are fascinated with it before we move on with the article, which is this. It's ultimate. Would you say? I mean, I buy somewhat into the disenchantment thesis of Weber, and others, that one of the things that this mechanistic worldview of modernity has created, along with a kind of de facto atheism and so on, is simply now we live in a bleached out, disenchanted natural world. And a bleached out, disenchanted natural world leaves us devoid of anything spiritual. So we go looking for it in other surrogate ways, in penultimate ways, whether it's money, power, fame, sex, video games, porn,
Yeah.
whatever. We seek substitutes for that religious sense. Um, I also buy into, though, Eugene McCarraher's, in his book, The Enchantments of Mammon, his sort of critique of the disenchantment thesis by pointing out we always have enchantments. The only question is the quality of those enchantments.
Hmm.
And so I look at the popularity of things like the Harry Potter books, the Lord of the Rings, and so on. It does seem that people, and it goes to what you were just talking about with regard to the young people seeking out nature. It does seem that people are seeking a re-enchanted cosmos. But is the church doing what it needs to do in order to reach out to that felt need? In
Right.
other words, and
Right.
I'll quit talking, let you talk. I've always thought that the great hidden gem of Catholicism that doesn't get shouted out enough from the rooftops is the contemplative, monastic, mystical
Yeah.
side of the Catholic faith, which is what I think people are really thirsting for.
Yeah. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Man has a longing for the infinite that he is going to try to fill one way or another at some point in his life or another, right? The God-sized hole in our soul that we just try to fill with stuff. And, that's why materialists will seek out, living forever. That's their game, and others will go off in fantasy or drugs or other things. So that's since the beginning of time, right? Is the church doing enough? I think in as far as the church is true to herself, she's doing precisely what she needs to do, and putting that on display. I think we can talk for days about the troublesome attempts that the church has made to conform to the world and to be popular or attract. But I read an article or over the summer, very brief, just pointing out that many young people, especially young women, are booking themselves into monasteries and to live among nuns in a monastic style, even without even being religious, for the whole summer. They're just saying, I don't want to deal with summer and all of the stress and strain and social media and judging and all that. I'm just going to go be quiet by myself. So I'm really interested, to see what this younger generation is, rebelling against their parents, rebelling against the world in a lot of ways. So people are finding their way back.
Putting our faith into action through the real presence of Jesus, that is Gaudiumetspes. And you can check out that podcast easy when you, of course, search it wherever you like to stream, or go to Podcast Central at EWTN.com/podcast. You can binge them, take them with you for your Labor Day weekend, and enjoy. I hope you do enjoy the rest of your Labor Day weekend. I'm going to do the same, get something good on the grill and some time to chill. And in the meantime, remember to let God define who you are. And I'll see you again with Catholics Coast to Coast.